O Lord of hosts, be with us, for we have none other help in times of adversity but Thee. O Lord of hosts, have mercy on us.
All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Carey with Church of the Eternal Logos. And today we have an open panel. We're going to be discussing one of the hottest topics right now in American culture. I'm sure all of you are already quite aware. You can't get away from it. And that is the Donald Trump conviction of 34 felonies in the state of New York. And we're going to be discussing what is the impact or meaning behind this. And obviously, we're not coming at it as necessarily the biggest MAGA supporters. And I've been vocal in regards to some of my criticisms of Trump and the LGBTQ stuff, the jibby jab, Operation Warp Speed. The list can go on. But I think this conversation is interesting from more of a academic perspective. So the way that I look at it, and way I think it's interesting is looking at people as sort of representative symbols of historical moments. And whether you like Trump or not, obviously he's kind of a funny guy. There were some of the stuff he says, and he's certainly not politically correct, which is something that I can appreciate. But we've talked about the 2016 movement with Trump and the arrival of Jordan Peterson, and this being a sort of pendulum swing potentially back to a more traditional conservative counterculture. And I think it's quite apparent at this point that conservatism is the counterculture. But what does all this mean? And just kind of observing it, I always kind of feel like I'm a third party when these topics emerge. So I'm just on the outside observing the phenomenon of what's occurring. And, you know, he's raised, I don't know if you've seen, what is it? The conviction was Friday? And so in the first 24 hours, he raised like 52.8 or something million dollars for his presidential campaign. And then within 2 days, it was up to like 80 some million. And according to what I was trying to look up today, from somebody on X posted a couple hours ago, that it's now over $400 million that the Trump campaign has raised since the conviction. So, you know, it's, and one of the things I've noticed, just been kind of following more of the liberal media and those types of figures, is the convicted felon slogan is used every single time. So this trying to, convicted felon, Donald Trump, the convicted felon. Will people vote for a convicted felon? I'm sure you guys have already picked up on that as well. So the panel is open. I have a few things that we're going to cover before we get into the conversation. So anybody who wants to join, again, here is the link. I've already put it, and it's in the video description. So if anybody here on YouTube, you can just click open the video description and you'll see the link to jump on. I'm curious what some people's opinions are. And I'd be really curious if anybody's outside the United States that could join to kind of let us give a sort of international insight. Because, most of the people I've talked to in Europe, especially in Germany, they're very, very much influenced by their media apparatus. And so it's very common that people think Obama is like the greatest American president in history. And even in Germany, one of the things that I noticed, and obviously my fiance is from Germany, is a lot of anti-Trump hatred that's, again, spawned from their mainstream media. But as a cultural figure, he does kind of represent, now whether you think it's real or not, and I've heard a few conspiracy theories. I've heard a few people say that, oh, well, this is all just an effort to get Trump reelected by the Democrats. I don't know. Am I open to it? Potentially. That seems unlikely to me, given the efforts and the extents, the judicial system and the Democrats have gone to try to hamper his presidential run. So I don't know. I have kind of pondered whether he was a sort of false opposition. How did they let him get in during the 2016 election? To me, that motive, that direction doesn't seem as stimulating and strong as some of the kind of more just normie takes, that this is all an effort to undermine his presidential election and reelect Joe Biden, who we know is essentially a vegetable. I mean, it's not like that's one of the biggest frustrations I get is when people say, oh, Joe Biden did this, or Joe Biden's doing that, or Joe Biden has an open board. Joe Biden's not doing anything. Like, we need to take that out of our rhetoric once and for all. Joe Biden is not doing anything at all. If Joe Biden doesn't know where he's at, Joe Biden literally shit his pants when he was at the Vatican with the Pope. What was that, 2 years ago? It's the people, it's the deep state, it's the bureaucratic structure, the military industrial complex, the career bureaucrats. These are the people that we're up against, and there is no election that's going to solve that. And that's where, again, another criticism I would aim at Trump is, as we saw with the first election, he's talking about draining the swamp, and then he literally hires the swamp. And I know for some people who are much stronger Trump supporters believe, well, he kind of learned his lesson, and this second time around, he's not going to be so gullible, and he's not going to, hire the same people that are against him. I don't know. I did recently see, I don't know how accurate, I didn't see a video. I like to see a video of Trump saying these things, because when you're on X or whatever, you never know what's actually true. But the claim was Donald Trump said that he's open to offering Nikki Haley a position in his administration. It's like, dude, really? Come on. So I don't know if he's actually learned his lesson. I certainly don't think Trump's going to save us. But as a cultural figure, this is what's so interesting, is like what he represents. And he does represent, in the minds of many people in the country, the preeminent force resisting our sort of governmental tyranny. And I've noticed, just within baby boomers, people that are more normie oriented, the rhetoric of civil war accelerating. And that's something that I would give a little bit more credence to. Again, we talked about, I did a review, or discussed a little bit, I think, with BLA. We didn't do a full review on the movie Civil War. I think that was one that was also sponsored, or at least partly funded, by the Obamas, where the whole premise is that the journalist, America's in a civil war, and the states of California, Texas, and Florida's National Guards have united to fight against the U.S. government, and the president is sort of like a Trump figure, and the journalists are going around and looking at the country, and they have to go this long route to try to make their way into Washington, D.C., because their goal is to get to the president. And of course, it's all white men with Christian crosses that are, killing people in mass and have massive open graves. You already get the plot, right? And it ends with the assassination of the president, a la Donald Trump. And this, again, is all oriented around a domestic civil war in the United States. And I begin to speculate that if the Democrats, and it's not just the Democrat, that's what I hate using this link. It's almost 90% of the Republican Party is the uniparty. It's the entire political apparatus in the United States. And how much of an outsider Donald Trump is, I think that's open to question. But certainly, to some degree, he is fighting it, and in the minds of many people, he is the sort of preeminent spear to respond against the sort of deterioration, or the planned deterioration of our country. But I could see, and this was actually discussed recently, Tucker Carlson had an interview with Donald Trump Jr. And in that interview, Carlson made a comment that he has made really the last 6 months, that if the bureaucratic deep state structure can't stop Trump, that they're going to assassinate him. And he highlighted, and I have a clip video that I'll actually show you guys. Let me pull it up real quick, of him talking about how they're already attempting to pull his Secret Service security, which would obviously make it a lot more easy. And we saw, and I don't know if you guys saw recently, I think it was yesterday or the day before, James Comey, the former CIA director, the guy that was behind the whole Russiagate scandal and all that stuff, literally was saying that what they're going to do is imprison Trump and put him in a trailer that's on the prison grounds, and he'll be separated from the general populace, and he'll be able to exercise and shower and live out his jail sentence from a trailer. And it's like, what? So we have a former CIA agent literally thinking that they're going to imprison Trump. And of course, the sentencing after these 34 felony charges is 4 days before the RNC National Convention, which is really interesting. So let me show you a few of these videos just to give you a context, because just to get a feel of like what exactly is going on here, I think is interesting. Let me pull my speaker up. And so first one I want to do is the Tucker Carlson, because I think the threat of assassination is a real one. And it's not just an assassination to stop Trump, but it'd be an assassination that they knowingly would spark a domestic civil war. And so let me play this for you guys real quick. This one right here.
The convictions come down 34 yesterday, and your father goes out there and just basically raises the middle finger and says, we're going to win anyway. And within hours, Benny Thompson of Mississippi, who's a monster, Democratic congressman, says, introduces legislation to pull his Secret Service. Yeah. So basically they're saying, okay, we'll kill you now.
Well, they did that a while ago also. If he goes to prison, we want to pull his Secret Service. So basically, if we put him in a cell, we're going to put him in a place where he could be murdered.
But that's a death threat.
Of course it is. But
from a member of Congress.
Again, should it surprise us? I mean, you look at half the congressmen, get in their faces, make them feel it. I mean, they can say these things and they are lauded as heroes. If we said something even remotely like that, we're literally inciting violence. I mean, those words are violence, Tucker. We've seen this. The double standard that's out there. I mean,
the convictions come down 34 yesterday, and your father.
So anyways, I thought that's really interesting that even Donald Trump Jr. was willing to admit to some degree that it's very possible that they're going to try to kill his dad. Now, I've heard people who have brought this up to Donald Trump in person, and this was what Carlson said in a older interview, that he totally dismisses and ignores any idea that they would try to assassinate him. But according to Trump, he saw the JFK files and said that he understands why they can't make it public, which would insinuate to me that he knows that the government did it, the CIA and various Israeli factions, if you're familiar with the context of JFK and how he felt about Israel's nuclear program. But I'll leave that aside. So anyways, hey, Father Deacon Dr. Ananias, God bless you, brother. Christ is risen. If you're free, hop onto the stream here. We got an open panel. Be curious what your thoughts are. So if you're here, Father Deacon, hop on, man. Let me share the link again for everybody. Anybody who wants to join, feel free. You can do so with this link right here. And we can, I'm going to open it up to an open panel here in just a few. We don't have anybody backstage yet, but I got a few more videos that I wanted to show. So I thought that that's pretty interesting that, Donald Trump Jr. was already open to the possibility of an assassination of his father. And to me, that is a likely scenario. To me, there's, as I said, I've speculated there isn't going to be an election. So to me, there's only three options moving forward here. It's obviously another rigged election. That's one. And so the powers that be stay in power. There'll never be a transition of power again. I mean, you can legitimately argue that there was never a transition of power when Trump came in office because he hired all the same people. But the other options to me is a potential assassination that would spark a civil war, which probably would nullify any potential election in 2024. And that seems plausible. Obviously, we've seen, The End of the World and then Civil War, two movies sponsored by the Obamas, which already insinuate a sort of power grid outage, domestic civil war, legitimate fighting and factions within the United States that are divided by religion, race, and ethnicity. But the other one is the heating up of World War III. And so I don't know if you guys saw, but I was following a little bit. The night Trump's convictions came in, the 34 convictions, Joe Biden was actually scheduled to do a press conference at the White House, which he then canceled. And what happened is the White House then issued a press release stating that they are now okaying Ukraine to utilize U.S. weapons for the targeting of Russian cities such as Moscow and St. Petersburg. Now, we already know that the Ukraine is using U.S. weapons. We already know that this is a proxy war for NATO and America and Israel fighting Russia. But if that gets into, I mean, because that seems like why would the president release a press release like that, knowing that it could only instigate further conflict? It makes zero sense unless that was the point, to potentially escalate the conflict so that there's now a World War III before the upcoming presidential election. So all that to me seems possible. Slow Boy Whiteboard says we've been in a civil war for 7 years. The victims so far haven't noticed in mass. Well, I think you could probably make that claim for sure. And with the prosecution of the J6ers, which is a absolute tragedy. I mean, these people are locked. Some of them are locked in solitary confinement, and they've been there for over a year or such. I mean, did you guys see that a woman who is like 75 years old and in a wheelchair was just convicted of, I don't even know what exactly the crime was, but she was praying outside an abortion center. And she was given 2 years of prison for praying outside of an abortion center. What? I mean, our country is so screwed. Our country is over. It's pretty much over. And that's where I actually had another clip I wanted to show you guys from Marjorie Taylor Greene, kind of in highlighting this, this idea that there's like formalities that are, that we have to go through in our country. I mean, we live in a banana republic. The United States is not a free country. This idea of democracy is a joke. We have no representation, and we have no ability to facilitate any type of change with our government. So what's going to happen? It seems like the powers that be know the only thing that could happen is an internal civil war. But anyway, this was MTG, a recent response regarding these convictions. So check this out.
What should now that this conviction for Trump, what should the speaker do in retaliation of this conviction?
So the speaker, if you couldn't hear, it was kind of quiet. The interviewer asked the journalist, what should the Speaker of the House do given the convictions of Trump? Now, Mike Johnson, as we discussed before, is a pathetic excuse for a man. Mike Johnson is one of these dispensationalist Christian Protestants who believe that the Jews are the chosen people, and that his first order of business when he got elected to the speaker after McCarthy was to issue some type of bill giving more money to Israel and its protection against, all these different threats. And so he believes that Jews are the chosen people, and he believes that Jews don't need to convert to be saved as we approach the end time. So these are the type of people, and this is where the legitimate argument goes to, is like, who actually runs our country? And it doesn't seem like anybody running our country has any sort of real principles or any even traditional Christian theology to understand the relationship with Israel, things that are going on, and they will sacrifice the United States at all costs to preserve Israel. It's part of their theology. But anyways, here's MTG's response, and I think it's poignant. Not that I'm a huge MTG fan or anything like that. Marjorie Taylor Greene, for those of you who don't know, but I'm just trying to grab snapshots. Like, I got one of Dr. Phil. I'm not a huge Dr. Phil fan, but just grabbing snapshots of looking at the Trump conviction as a phenomenon in culture and seeing how people are responding. So check this out.
The Speaker of the House is one of the most powerful people in the country. We control the budget. we control the power of the purse. If Speaker Johnson actually supports President Trump like he claims, he should stop the special counsel, Jack Smith, and we should be using the power of the purse to hold New York accountable for the sham convictions against President Trump. The entire thing is political. It's outrageous, and our country is completely turned a corner.
Even if it leads to a government shutdown in the fall?
Yeah, it doesn't matter anymore. We're a banana republic. I mean, it literally does not matter, and that's how people feel. This has come to the point where they are going to try to put President Trump in prison with these fake felony charges and convictions. Are absolutely fake. A legal expense, yeah, that's what you write for paying a lawyer. That is literally what you write. We aren't a serious country anymore. We're literally a banana republic. So what does it matter if I'm in the government? The American people don't give a shit.
And that's the truth. The American people don't give a shit because our government is totally fake. It's a fraud. And you know, import the third world, become the third world. We are a third world country at this point in regards to the accountability of our elected officials and whatnot. It's a real joke. And so here's the clip of Joe Biden, our vegetative president right now, being asked what his thoughts were regarding the Trump conviction. And of course, he can hardly walk, and I speculate he didn't even know where he's at during this.
Donald Trump refers to himself as a political prisoner and blames you directly. What's your response to that, sir? Do you think the conviction will have an impact on the campaign? We'd love to hear your thoughts, sir.
Should he be on the ballot, sir?
The guy doesn't even know where he is. But meanwhile, like, I don't know if you guys watch. I love watching the UFC. So UFC 302 just happened. And, of course, Trump appears at these major events. And this one was 10 miles away from New York. It was in New Jersey. And this was the roaring applause he received from the UFC crowd, which, of course, is majority conservative men, men that are going to have a little bit more patriotism than the average political listener on CNN or whatnot. But it doesn't seem like his support is diminished at all. And in fact, I'm going to show you an article next, which shows that his support has actually jumped 6 points. So it looks like, the general reaction, like I said, he's already raised over $400 million. And according to this article right here, this is a Zero Hedge article. Post-conviction polls show an increased support for Donald Trump. As it shows, his support overall post-conviction has actually gone up plus 6 points. Now, how accurate this is, I don't know. And again, does voting really matter when we know that our elections are rigged? Not really. But the article reads, amongst independents, key voting group that will be crucial to success, 20% feel more positive about Trump compared to 16% who feel more negative. Independents largely do not think the hush money case was undertaken with the right motives or that Trump's actions were troubling enough for the case to be charged. Amongst Trump's own MAGA supporter base, 54% said the ruling had no impact on their support, while the guilty verdict solidified their support of 36% of Trump's 2020 voters, while just 6% felt more negative about him. And this reads here, according to CBS News, overall opinions of the verdict are in line with what views of Trump's guilt or innocence were before the verdict was reached. Among those who thought Trump was guilty before the hearing the verdict, 9 in 10 now say the jury reached the right verdict, and vice versa. Those who previously thought he wasn't guilty, according to reports. So this is a little video of Fox News. We're not going to check that out or anything, but we got a few people backstage. So let's kind of open up the panel now and see what your guys' thoughts are about Donald Trump and what's going to ensue next. So, John, welcome, brother.
Hey, David. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Do you happen to have a camera by chance, or are you?
I do. I'm on my phone, and I'm working at home. Do you mind? I don't know if you.
No,
yeah,
it's all
I'm
good.
a real person. I swear, I'm not going to troll the stream.
Okay. We got Logan Daly in the house. What's up, brother?
Oh, not much. It's good to be here. Nice to see you and Nadim again.
Absolutely. I didn't even know that was you, and it says Big Snake Prattler. Let me pull up the names real quick. So, anyways.
How's it going, DPH?
Good, brother. Good to see you as well. You still in
Good to see you
Lebanon?
guys. Yeah, we're back in Lebanon.
All right.
So,
So curious, guys. Feel free, whoever wants to take it away. What are you guys' thoughts on this whole Trump conviction and you know what it means? Obviously, I don't think anybody here is going to think that Trump's going to save America or anything, but just generally looking at American culture and anticipating the way he's viewed by other people. What are your guys' thoughts?
Is he
I
the
think
first criminal?
culturally, I think the U.S. kind of needs someone that to revive the patriotism of the U.S. I mean, Trump does a way better job at that than Joe Biden. We can all agree. However, would he save the U.S.? Of course not. It'll keep losing and losing its cultural power, but I don't know. At least it's better to have a person with an actual mind that's actually at least like that it looks like there's a person that's controlling the White House than just like a controlled puppy, you know. So
right, agreed. John, what are your thoughts?
Kind of my view.
Well, I'm curious. Is he the first convicted, or I know we've had presidents with checkered past, but in terms of like actual historical, is he the first one or like one of them?
I believe
don't know
so.
that.
Yeah, I believe
so.
so.
Oh wow, shoot. Yeah,
But,
so this is an actual historical event.
Right.
And not a surprise.
And 34 felonies, right? So it's not he was just convicted of just a few crimes. Now, obviously, we know there are shams. They had to change like the statute of limitations, the charging for this crime, which once the charges were filed and they rescinded and that the statute of limitations went back to the way that they were, which wouldn't have allowed the case to be brought. So, yeah,
gotcha.
But it is kind of historic, and the fact that we have a presidential candidate who, but you know, go ahead, John. I don't mean to cut you off.
No, that was great explication.
But then I wanted to get into the mimetics of it, because this whole convicted felon slogan that all the mainstream media is using over and over and over, I think it's going to potentially bite them in the butt, because it's actually kind of edgy and cool, and the people that are going to support Trump are going to be more enthusiastic than ever before.
Yeah, I mean, look at like how popular Bonnie and Clyde was. I remember Johnny Depp. Do you remember that movie with Johnny Depp where he played that criminal from the 20s? You know, that was like a kind of a Robin Hood figure. So I think it's definitely.
I'm not sure. I don't think I've seen that one.
Yeah, I can't remember. But yeah, like they're remaking Billy the Kid stuff again. So yeah, there's a lot of outlaw mystique in America. So yeah, I think it optically. It's interesting to me. Like I remember back in 2016 when the grab him by the P word comment came out. I thought it was over then. So like going way back to the annals of history. I mean, this isn't even a big deal actually. If we take it like zoom out a little bit.
Right. Logan, what are your thoughts, man?
Like obviously I don't agree that he's any sort of like messiah figure here to save America. Like he's still part of the systemic issues of classical liberalism and this country's foundations.
Agreed.
But like he's obviously better than the alternatives in a lot of ways. Because like I'm not in uniform, so I'll just say it. It is kind of uneasing to know my commander-in-chief is a dementia patient. So like, and like this trial is like anybody with a brain can see that they've put through all this effort and gone all the extra way just to cut him down a peg. And like I guess it's almost renewing my faith in the American people in a way, in that people are seeing it for what it is and saying, hey, this is very obviously blown out of the water and a bit of a witch hunt.
No, I'll tell you, I'll echo your sentiment. One of the things I was surprised is I know a guy, he's a boomer, and he's a liberal Democrat, and he's been a staunch supporter of Biden. And after the conviction, he felt uneasy about it and was articulating, again, I don't really engage, but he's a friend of my brother-in-law. And he thought, oh, this is going too far. I think this is going to backfire. And this is, not justice. And this is actually making a mockery of our country. And this is somebody who's like the normie leftist boomer Democrat. And I was like, man, now I don't know how widespread that sentiment is by people on the left side of the aisle, but it has some type of repercussion. It does seem like minorities, particularly Hispanics and blacks, actually have embraced Trump more so after the conviction. But yeah. Andrew, what's up, brother? What are your thoughts?
Hey, good to see you. I honestly think that it's a symptom of how much the Castro-Chavist networks have influenced this country, because it's almost like we're in the position that a lot of the South American countries like Colombia are, where the two major parties are legit socialist versus capitalist now, and that they've gone so far as to attack him. It's become overt that something crazy is going on, and I hope that people see that once you're willing to do this within the system, that you're coming at it from completely outside the system, and you're trying to hijack things, and you're like, our system is being gamed against us by these people, and it's starting to become transparent. And I honestly think that, like, it's not that Trump's gonna fix it. He absolutely could, because it was, I think in 2020 he tweeted about Castro-Chavism and all of the networks behind these people that Alvin Bragg, I'm sorry, I have like a crack in my lens because I dropped my phone and it always catches the light. I was trying to like find the safest place for it. But most of these people are connected to foreign influence networks. A lot of them have openly pledged their allegiance to movements that are openly anti-American, that are connected to foreign influence networks, and they're operating as agents of foreign state. If we put our focus on the networks instead of worrying about the ideology, and take down the networks that are implementing the kind of stuff that gets our freaking ex-president put on the stand, the funding, the supporters, the people who write the articles in favor of it, the protesters that turn up in droves that are connected across networks of networks throughout all this. Like, if we as a country in 4 years do something equivalent to the Subversive Activities Control Board and put these people on the back foot. But I honestly think, and with the fact that Trump tweeted about Castro-Chavism, I think he knows, or his people know, and God, I'm going to try to get through to him and let him know what we know about these networks. But yeah, he knows about Castro-Chavism, and yeah, you take down the networks, you take down the influence.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree that I think he can correct, even if he was fully aware of whether it be communist influences or just the global elite that really control the country.
It would take an immense cultural effort to change the minds and de-radicalize people as well, because you've got, like, we've had global conventions plotting the communist takeover for 23 years now, and nobody's talking about them. The World Social Forums, the communist alternative to the World Economic Forum, and like, people think Klaus Schwab is evil. They should look up Bernard Cassin, the French journalist who started the World Social Forums to compete with Davos from a more communist front, basically, and they've eclipsed Davos in size and in influence, and that's what we're seeing. And if we, like, Venezuela was flying US based welfare rights activists to Caracas to give them training at the forums and all this other business. There were secret meetings between members of U.S. activist groups or Canadian, anyway, at one of the social forums, Western domestic influence groups meeting at the Venezuelan embassy. Who knows what they discussed, but we know that they had those meetings, or at least that's what they've openly said. And yeah, this is communism's always been a foreign operation, and this is part of that operation. George Soros is involved in terms of Alvin Bragg. He's connected to all of these organizations. He funds so many of the organizations that were connected via the social forums. If I'm not mistaken, I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of varying connections, so that I am making some generalities, and I do not speak for the company that I work for and am part of. This is like my personal opinion and stuff.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm sure you look into it, you'll find it.
Yeah,
anyway.
I kind of agree with RIP that this is in a way all to set up further riots if Trump, even if we have a real election, or maybe they try to rig it and it's not even able to be totally rigged, and this is a sort of fuse for the powder keg. And he also said that all these plans make no sense, from the coup to the orchestrated events, including the mockery of this trial. They seem so weak and easy to see through. I don't see how people don't get these are false flag events. And I agree, and it's hard, because it seems like some people are waking up, but it does seem like those who already have their eyes closed are just closing them even tighter. But Father Deacon, welcome, brother. Christ is risen.
Yeah, I think you can bet the networks will be activated, protests, riots. If Trump legitimately wins an election, these networks will be involved in massive national pressure campaigns. But if we point them out in their foreign connections, then we have reason to stomp them into dust, arrest the right people for being subverters, and that's my 2 cents.
Right.
Trump 2024, baby. Thank you so much for the time.
Yeah, no problem, brother.
Love the optimism.
All right, bye-bye.
See ya. Father Deacon, did you have your I just voted badge on?
Yeah, where'd it go?
It's in your other cassock.
How are you doing,
man? Guys? Christ is risen indeed. Yeah, wonderful. It's funny because, I do the morning prayers, and sometimes somebody asks a question and then it opens up to something completely different at the end. And we kind of got into a lot of this stuff. And so, yeah, it's really, I kind of focused, and you know me, I kind of take more of a philosophical kind of analysis.
Right.
Propaganda. I wish I could do a course on Noam Chomsky's institutional analysis of the propaganda machine and manufacturing consent. And I think that's kind of what's the most fascinating part of all of this. And then, of course, we can make some predictions about what's happening. And I mean, what's so hard is you've got these think tanks and foundations and elite groups that are playing 4D chess. And so there's no transparency, and we're kind of left just trying to guess like what possibly could happen. I'm sure there's multiple plans too. When something doesn't work out, there's a beta plan.
Right.
But I think you're correct that prima facie, it would seem that one thing that they're trying to do is to get a rise out of the conservatives and the right, or not, and still do a false flag like January 6th kind of, insurrection. See these people. I certainly think that.
Yeah.
And it's not hard to obviously to put operatives into a group of peaceful protesters,
right,
and ignite something. So
Well, I have a
Yeah, so
question for you in the panel is, do you guys think that the people behind the scenes doing the prosecution and all these different trials that Trump is now a part of trying to prevent the campaign, do you think they really thought that it would like lower support for him or he would become more unpopular? And I only bring this up because this was a graph that I found today that visits to the donation campaign, according to what I saw by a few different sources, is that at some point this afternoon today, Eastern Standard Time, he had already raised $400 million since the announcement of the conviction. And it's like the amount of money that is flowing into his campaign now and the fervor behind him, that seemed obvious. So I'm curious, what do you guys? That's what, if we're going to look at motives and larger plans, if they already thought it was going to do that, well, then, like Father Deacon is saying, the plans, the steps that are going to occur afterwards seem like they're like it's going to follow suit. So therefore, fire up his base, get him more fervent, and then a major false flag happens where now they're going to be out in the streets. What are your guys' thoughts?
I'm not really. I don't really know about the American judicial system, but I'm sure that if they knew that it would grow his campaign, they might think of what happened in New York to be like a sort of ripple effect through other states, so that other states might join the same sort of agreement on the conviction number.
I think
So it might be a kind of way to completely illegitimize his candidacy, but it might in the way.
I get your point, but as somebody in the United States and who's an American, I think it was predictably obvious that his support would only go up. That's what it seems to me, that there's a larger plan here.
So I agree with the point that it's obvious that it would grow. But not knowing the judicial way in the US, I was kind of thinking maybe it would completely put his status as like a block point that he couldn't even be a candidate.
I don't think that's the case.
Okay.
What about
we could also say too, part of this, I mean, I think you already mentioned this, Patrick, that so the justice system and various departments have been weaponized, have been infiltrated, that at whatever level, and if there's stuff going beyond that and other plans is irrelevant. There is no election transparency. We had the issue with 4 years ago, I think, and then obviously this kangaroo court that's just obvious even to normie Dems, boomers. They're like, whoa, some people are starting to wake up.
Right.
I think one purpose of it is destabilization.
Right. That's what makes sense to me, is just to cause more internal conflict, more division, so that a real false flag event. And let me bring this up because my point goes along with the super chat that just came in. And shout out to Frankie D, throws in $5. He says, World War III is imminent, bros. Military is seriously preparing for conflict with China, which we know means they will use false flags to trigger the conflict. Agreed. And that's where I was actually speculating, well, what if they let Trump get into office and the people who really pull the strings go ahead and then spark off World War III, which will then galvanize Trump's supporters to join the military to fight for the country because their president will be in charge, and that would catalyze the World War III event and garner more political public support for the war.
Wasn't it Mike Pompeo's office? I mean, he was doing, Obama was not terribly involved in Ukraine. I mean, he got it rolling, but it seemed like Mike Pompeo, from what I'm understanding, is kind of started doing more and more and more to the point where Zelensky came in 19. So it is very possible. I think that's actually a pretty good theory, David.
Yeah. And Frankie D throws in another $5, says, I think there is a decent chance Trump does get elected. It's obviously anybody with their eyes open knows that the majority of the country supports him at this point. Now, whether we have a real election, that's a totally different topic. But if they do let him become the president, I do think there's a possibility. He says he's totally backing Israel. True. So who is going to get elected? Well, agreed. Yeah, I brought that up as well in regards to Israeli foreign support. So, but I'm just looking at it, and I mentioned
They all
just
back Israel.
Exactly, all of them. I was mentioning this, like Father Deacon, you said you kind of look at it at a philosophical lens, and I kind of was looking at it just like a sociological, like when these things emerge, because I'm not really emotionally invested into Trump per se, that it's like I can kind of stand back as a third party and just see how this is galvanizing and influencing other people around me, and just looking at online rhetoric and stuff like that. And it seems predictably obvious that his support and funding would go through the roof, would increase. And it just seems to me that this is, like we said, sparking more internal conflict, a potential civil war, or let him get elected and then use his supporters to fight the war for him. But I'll let you guys speak. What are you guys' thoughts?
Well, if I might chime in into this conversation, I think that one aspect that wasn't mentioned that is worth mentioning is the fact that, like, power in itself, as it's being exerted, like, ripples. So, for example, take the jabs. Like, part of it wasn't just about injecting you with something. It was just about, like, letting you know who can inject you something, which is basically, it's basically setting a symbolic precedent of the state can jab you whenever the state wants. And that is a self-reinforcing loop, because now that we've established that the state can do this, and the way that this symbol is, like, played out is basically, let's say, probably the state, the deep state wants Trump to be backed against a corner. And even if he does win an election, he's going to feel, let's say, the sting of the pressure put on him. So, but even if that does not impede Trump to win a re-election, I still think that Trump is for pro-technocracy. Like, take for example the Meloni, Giorgia Meloni, the Italian prime minister. She's basically now saying that she wants to work within the UE, the European Union, the EU, and like, she wants to reform it from within. Basically, she's betraying the identitarian base that she had. Why? Because these right-wing populist figures like Meloni, like Trump, they're really not against the deep state. They're like simply a nuisance. They're like progressives at a very slow pace, and the deep state is making them feel that they cannot do anything, and this will not prod them into being, let's say, more reactive against the deep state. It will simply, like, mark the ending of their influence, like, mark to where, like, the limits of where they could go against. So I don't think this has to do so much, like, about, it's not so much about, let's say, shifting public opinion as much as it is exercising power in a concrete sense. So even if it I think it does have an impact on Trump's candidacy, in the sense that he might not get elected simply because of the smearing effect. But I don't think that's actually what the powers that be want. I think that they simply want to make Trump, like, continue to be their puppet, because he's such a soft pushback that it's actually better for them, perhaps, that Trump wins.
I get your point. And if they did assassinate Trump, which I think there's a possibility, the RNC would have to call a convention, and there would be a vote taking place on the floor for the 4 candidates that were left in the race after him to take place. But if they did kill him, to your point in regards to exercising power, who is willing to step up to even nominally fight the system as much as Trump, is or isn't? but who's going to step up and actually try to make a change? It seems like that would also reinforce your general perspective that that's going to alienate anybody who really wants to make a difference, because if they can do it to Trump, who's a billionaire and who has a public name, well, they can do it to anybody. We have a question for Father Deacon I actually want to get to. And Frankie D sent in one right before that, so I want to bring that up. He threw in another $5. Thank you so much, Frankie D, for the support, man. Really appreciate it. He says there's a meme about when you see white dudes in the military commercials, things are getting serious. And I did see that. I did see that. No, there was a couple that came on the television while I was watching sports the other day. It was all white guys. No Skittles were in the commercial. I think there was 2 separate commercials I saw. And you know that there's already talk in Congress and stuff about issuing a military draft, which again is sort of already tease off the fact that we're going towards war. But Frankie D has a question for Father Deacon, so I want ask that. He says, Father Deacon, this question is for you. I personally am struggling to see where God is in all of this. I'm especially steeped in the propaganda, and it's like, how do we live in the lying world? Why they win? And he followed up by saying, what I mean is they are kind of winning. They get to lie in perpetuity here. It's like, when does the buck stop? And is that even good? Many would die in a chaotic societal breakdown as much as war.
Yeah, I think from like an Orthodox perspective, first thing is we need to be skeptical about ourselves and our own judgments. I always just say, like, how's your track record on figuring stuff? It's if we're honest with ourselves, it's really bad. The things that we think that there's no way out, this is terrible, this person's winning. You know, I myself have gone through a lot of persecution and hate. It could have been really easy. And I know people felt that way. Like, why are the bad people winning? I'm like, not winning. God's in control. And so I think the thing that how do I get to that point? You become friends with God. You live a life with God, and you start to realize that everything is allowed. Everything is authorized by God, and that God's winning. And that it's simply our perception at the particular time that the bad guys are, where is God? But when you enter into, so I just say focus on the small things, the regular, consistent, the things that you know you're actually in control of. Go to services, do your morning prayers, your prayer rule, take the sacraments, volunteer coffee hour in church, almsgiving, things like this. And what starts to happen is that you begin to see through God's eyes. You begin to, as Father Russell always says, that I don't know why he says 30,000 foot view or something like that. Obviously, God has the cosmic view, but he's always
wondered where that came from.
To put it in terms of eternity. I mean, as Orthodox Christians, even in the liturgy, the already not yet, we see things through the eschaton, right? Even in the liturgical cycles, we start with the end. And I think when you practice that more and more, that you start to see, I see God everywhere in all this. I know God's working, and you have to understand he is duping the devil the exact same way that he duped the devil when Christ knocks on the doors of Hades.
Glory to God.
Who is this Lord of Sabaoth? The Lord, and clothed in glory, right? And lets Christ, life himself, into its jaws of death. And as Father Russell always says, and death and the devil bite down on a jawbreaker, and it breaks their jaw. And so the Lord our God, the Lord of Sabaoth, is tricking these people, right? Through their own hubris and stuff like that. They're hanging themselves. So we have to allow this to happen, because they defeat themselves on their own evil, and God is glorified in this. Remember what it says in Scripture too. who sinned that this man was born blind? Was it his father? Him? No, that God may be glorified. So I say take the same approach with all this. Like, why is this happening? Where is God? So that God may be glorified. That's the Orthodox mindset through all that.
Yeah,
it's the way out of the black pill too.
And I want to follow up with that because I was recently talking, and thank you again, Frankie D, for all the support, brother. He threw in another $5. Said it just seems there aren't any winning options for us as regular people here. And I wanted to point, I had a recent conversation with somebody who just kind of recently came back to Christ. They got baptized. They're Protestant. They're not Orthodox, coming from more of a normie lens. And they made a point that they felt like there is a great division that's happening. It's the final division. So they brought up like BLM versus those that weren't for BLM, Pride versus those who are not for Pride. And the last one is like God and Satanism. And this is just a regular kind of normie person. And they're coming to this conclusion that they feel like what's happening is the great division and that this is the last division of the people. Now, I don't know where their thoughts were in regards to the eschaton, but in regards to streams I just did a few ago, in regards to the eschatological visions of the blessed and our theology of the end times, many saints have said that this is going to be a process where those who are on the other side of the Great World War, it's going to be an explosion of Christ and orthodoxy and traditional values. And so is that, again, if we're looking at Father Deacon said, looking at it from a cosmic perspective of God, winning in the next 5 years or 10 years, maybe that's not the perspective, but winning in the next 20 years, 50 years, where more people are called to Christ, more people are called to repentance, maybe that is the win. But I agree with you, Frankie D. There's no way. I mean, I feel like the walls are totally closed in. There's no way we get out of this. That something dramatic has to happen. I just do not see any.
Yeah.
I think we should read this.
What's that? Oh, the City of God.
Won't that give us a lot of perspective, right? Because Augustine's going through basically up until his time. And remember, Augustine's seen the fall of the Roman Empire.
Right.
And he's going through with the theme exactly what you said, a city of man and a city of God, eternally at war with one another. The beast system, right? And yet, even the pagans, right? The pagan poets, all the history, he's basically showing how God's winning and working through all that. So maybe it's a good book to read. I know it's like 1,000 pages, but just a quick
casual read.
Yeah, quick little stream over the City of God. I got it right over there. That's a great point. I didn't even consciously bring that up, but actually that is a great framing for our times right now and how we as Christians can look at this eternal war, because really that's what's happening. And that's where I brought up my Protestant friend, is like, they're just kind of like now being able to see the spiritual war that's right before them. And I think that's encouraging, that more normie people are coming back to Christ, be it Protestantism or Catholicism. I save the apologetics for people. Like, once they get their feet wet, this person was not somebody I should start talking about church history with. But I was kind of encouraged by their vantage point and how they've shifted, especially since COVID.
I mean, I can jump in with that. It still depends on what Christ you're coming back to, because they seem, especially in the US, they seem to put the power of the American mindset to take over part of Christ, and they're replacing this kind of Americanism, classical liberalism, at the same level as Christ, and also their kind of theology of the chosen people is also wildly messed up.
Sure, but we could say the same thing about Europe and stuff like that. I mean,
Exactly. But
I don't think we need
I'm
to.
talking about the U.S. now, just to bring it back to the point of the U.S.
Yeah,
that-
Protestantism and Catholicism. Agreed.
Yeah.
The American civil religion certainly permeates many aspects, but like people that I've seen in my daily life, I think they're coming back to Christ, not in a sense of Americana. It's they're in their limited framework and their limited understanding. They're trying to do their best to try to get back to Christ and how they understand it. So I think it's admirable. Again, the gentleman that I was speaking to, I think he has sincere intentions for why he, joined one of his conservative Protestant parishes. So I get your point, Nadim. I've done whole streams on the civil religion and secularism in America, but the phenomenon that is occurring, I think many people are actually feeling called towards truth.
I think it's the brokenness,
I can just
too.
add the point, and I completely agree with what you said. 'Cause the people that are actually like full-heartedly want to follow Christ, I believe that this will grow orthodoxy. I think this actually is those people that are truly looking for Christ and coming back to Christ are eventually going to find orthodoxy. So
I agree with you 100% there.
I don't think it's going to be Protestantism. I think all this good is comes from Christ calling them to the church. So
amen to that. I totally agree with you there.
Hey, do you remember? Or I just got this kind of funny thought. Do you remember our first Montanica? And yeah, that's all real nice, Patrick. But what are we gonna do about it, boys?
Dude, I was just talking about that with somebody. Phil,
I wish
for everybody
you
listening,
could find the video of my face because I was like, I'm like, well, we're talking about. What do you mean we're doing things? Yeah, but what kind of practical?
For context for everybody listening,
khakis or something. What are you talking about?
For context for everybody listening, what Father Deacon's referring to is the first Montanica. We had, I think everybody had given their speech before Jay. Jay was going to go that evening, and I had just finished talking about, I think, the religion, or what I was considering a new religious movement in regards to psychedelics and occultism. The speech ends. It's open Q&A. And one guy stands up and he's like, okay, it's all great and all, but what are we going to do about it? Like, are we going to pick up weapons? Are we going to like go do, and everybody's just like looking, and that's what Father Deacon was saying. We're like,
well, remember he had a microphone too that I told like no recording.
Yeah.
And I was like
yeah, he was recording the conference, which was like, what?
It was hilarious. I was just like, wow.
Let's just say he started to glow a little bit when he stood up, and it was like, what is this guy talking about? No, I remember I told him, I was like, well, you go to, find your parish and build your men's group and build a local community. He's like, okay, yeah, okay, we're all Christians here, but what are we actually gonna do? It's like, okay, bro.
Yeah, that's nothing.
So it became like a forever, it became a meme actually.
Yeah.
So there's people at church that are like, yeah, that's all nice, Father Deacon, but what are we going to do about it?
Oh. Yeah. If I might chime in, I think there's a very interesting parallelism with that and the fact that most of the Western world's problems come from like faulty ideas that were tried to push and like imposed politically, like from Charlemagne onwards. Let's say even like the best moments that Europe had, now that I'm studying its history, had to do with, let's say, finding the moral justifications for their imperialism of like the Americas. So for example, ideas like I don't know, universal human rights come from like those periods. So if someone is asking about what we can do, like we can challenge those ideas that presuppose like a world government, like, because for example the idea of universal human rights, like who's gonna guarantee that you have those rights? Like that presupposes globalism, for example, like the idea of let's say I don't know, international law, that's another, let's say, concept that presupposes that nations don't have sovereignty, because what actually happens in reality is that a sovereign nation sends diplomats. Their diplomats can, let's say, establish a treaty, but if the treaty ends up not panning out for the benefit of the nation says, I'm not going to respect this treaty. So the idea of international law itself is a way to undermine, let's say, nations. So if you're asking how you're going to fight back, you got to fight back against these stupid ideas that steal the power from you, that come from heresies that eventually, let's say, are tried to be imposed upon you politically. It doesn't require you to grab, let's say, a gun and start a militia. You can simply start by saying, hey, this idea is actually completely wrong, mistaken. It goes against anything we know about, I don't know, this, that. Like, you can attack them from different, like, routes, and like, you can say, no, I'm not gonna follow these laws because I think, I don't know.
In regards to your argument here, which countries are sovereign? I mean, I agree with you that using international law or the World Health Organization, or hey, who somebody's making a lot of noise. There's like
I think it's
popping.
John.
Well, John's muted right now.
Is there still noise?
Couldn't be me. I'm muted.
Yeah. Not sure who it was. Okay. So in regards to Ivan's point, I would argue that almost all the first world countries aren't sovereign, and that they are globally controlled. To your argument there, using international law or global organizations. And the only countries that do have some type of sovereignty, that do say no, is Russia, China, Iran, right? The enemy's number one. Yeah, well, we all know what we came, we saw, and he's dead. So,
here's something interesting. I had a conversation with one of my parishioners. We were talking about the Constitution and Benjamin Franklin's takes on the Constitution, and I hadn't thought about this for a while. That Benjamin Franklin believed that the Constitution. So, like Ivan was talking about, rather than this kind of centrally planned kind of idea, and I'm not saying that the founders of America didn't have some of that kind of political enlightenment, obviously an ideology of top down, but there was the notion that the Constitution wasn't an imposing, but rather an emergent kind of phenomenon, the kind of ethos of that it could only be a constitution of authority insofar as the people had virtue.
Right.
And that this wouldn't mean anything once the people started leaving that kind of ethos and, not having virtue. And I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you thought in which case a constitution would be null and void, and that it would require a tyrant to put things back into order, which is what you see in, going through Greece and the Roman Empire too, when the kind of breakdown of the unity and ethos of a culture through the acquisition of vice. There, again, purely from a secular point of view, there is no political kind of solution of planning. Like, it requires kind of a tyrant with absolute authority to step in and fix. I'm not saying that's correct. I'm just saying it was interesting that Benjamin Franklin himself even kind of realized this. And you see this going on right now in the United States. Clearly, there's no unity culturally, religiously, otherwise, with the United States. So, I mean, how do you interpret and enforce law? How do you do any of these things if... Now, I probably would have said, well, that's the way it's going to end up if you start this American experiment the way that you're doing it. It's inevitably going to lead probably to that path. I don't think it was, the American idea that Alexis de Tocqueville praises was a great experiment.
Well, in regards to your point, I was just writing about this today for my dissertation as I was actually where I was at and tracing millenary and techno-utopia was in 18th century Freemasonry and moving into Augustus Comte and this idea of positivism and science. And for both of these groups moving out of the Enlightenment, they did believe in technological utopia, but they also put a preeminence on personal virtue and that these things had to go together. And so, like, as I write my dissertation, moving into chapter 2 of modern transhumanism, the emphasis on personal virtue is totally dissipated. And so even though like Franklin was in the Masonic lodges in England and France and America, he had kind of strange sexual proclivities, but there was still this insistence on like honor and virtue amongst peoples and the way you address people, the way you talk. Like this was all tied to this earthly utopia that they believe they were creating. And it's like that idea, I argue, is still present in transhumanism and the globalists, but virtue is nowhere present in their ordering and structuring of society.
Well, could that be because it's effeminate now, David? You think they're, because this is like Rachel writes about this at ad nauseum. This kind of that time frame matches up with like the feminization of a lot of these movements and theosophy and these things like that.
I don't think that virtue is completely absent. What I think is going on is that the ideas they have of virtue are changing.
That's a good point.
A lot,
yeah, like social justice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And for example,
yeah.
the main argument that people have against traditionalism and against monarchy and against like Christianity in general is that the Enlightenment, I don't know, and they like create this narrative that the Enlightenment did with slavery, like that slavery disappeared because of the Enlightenment principles. So like they carry water to their own let's say ideology, when actually like the efforts of the West, of the Christian West, or the, let's say, I would say the Catholic West, was to crush let's say slavery centuries before the Enlightenment. So but the thing is, let's say the Enlightenment takes all of these, let's say, humanistic ideals and then eventually perverts them. So it's not that they're without virtue, it's that they think that they're the perfect embodiment of virtue. So right. it's technocracy. That's the issue. And I think that the US was actually the first, let's say, the first nation to quash piracy. And I don't know if you know that there was a period in history where like there was a lot of piracy in the North Africa coast, the Barbary coast, and it was the US, the one that crushed those Muslim pirates, like because Europe couldn't do it. They tried to and they failed, and it was only when those pirates started like getting better technology and raiding, let's say, people that the US tried to protect. When they started messing with the Americans, that's when the Americans like established order. And you could say that's kind of like there's a parallelism between that and the Iraq War, for example. But the problem is, as time goes on, like the US tries to play this like hero of the world, let's say, a role, and it starts to do it more poorly as time goes on. And I think that's what's going on with globalism, in the sense that these technocrats, as like the West started becoming more enlightened and less Christian, let's say, all of the, let's say, Christian heresies that had appeared throughout, let's say, the Middle Ages, like they started appearing as, let's say, secular philosophy. And these secular philosophers were basically, let's say, giving intellectual backing to the politicians who wanted to implement those things. So basically now what we see as a lack of virtue is basically, let's say, all of the intellectual power that the West had was devoted to simply securing power, and securing power for an elite few who think that they're saving the world, like the Freemasons, because the Freemasons fancy themselves as the good guys, but who are actually like destroying the world through their technocracy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'd like to come back to the point of all those Western nations, especially the U.S., are based upon revolution and reformation and change and drastic change and complete rebellion against the system that was already in place. And that's and I can come back to John's idea of effeminate men, and that's not how men react in the patriarchal systems we are present in. We actually redeem our fathers' mistakes. We don't replenish them, and we don't revolute and try to change them. We try to fix them. We don't kind of eradicate their whole system, especially if their historicity is way bigger, is way longer, and there is no historicity in our new ideas. So.
Yeah, in regards to Ivan's point, I would agree that so like Comte, and I know Father Deacon knows this, we've actually talked about it privately, but he founded what was called the religion of humanity. And it was, the whole point was to use the scientific method to scientize the liberal arts and scientize all aspects of the social order. So that was right after the French Revolution, and France was in chaos. And he believed that, again, his totalizing scientific system was going to bring about a sort of techno utopia, which he believed, again, he did speak about virtue, and compared to contemporary standards, they would be considered more virtuous from things that are going on today. But I see that gradual progression as soon as he moves away, because he really is the first person that takes this techno-millenarian utopian worldview out of, he divorces it from Christianity and creates this new religion of humanity, which gives lip service to Christianity and different aspects to it. But that is then the social justice ethos. That is this new virtue ethic that's tied with conformity to the system. And
I don't think they have a virtue. I mean, I don't like to always quote McIntyre, but his after virtue and stuff like this. That, like you said, Patrick, I don't know exactly who's the kind of last of it holding on as far as like political thinkers. But this soon just gets replaced with kind of like the Marx and the radical thought of the 19th century, in which everything's just interpreted in terms of power struggles. And I totally want to do a stream reviewing that that paper from the British University of British Columbia psychologists on virtuous victimhood and the dark triad traits. The dark triad traits being narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy.
Right.
And that what you see, like you may see people talking about virtue or pretending they're, but I don't think that they're even conceiving of it. They're just power words. And again, in terms of Machiavellianism, I'll just define that is seeing people as a means only. So, of course, we use people as a means. I hire a plumber or something like that, but I don't see them only as a means. Machiavellianism would be your means only, and I'll use whatever manipulation I need to do in order to serve my narcissistic kind of ideas. So what they're doing, if there is any kind of semblance of appeal to virtue, and I don't even know if they even say that. There's this notion of maybe social justice being called virtue or something like that, or the oppressed being virtuous, right? The virtuous victim. But there's absolutely no concept of virtue at all. It's a power. It's a power play. Is basically to serve their own. So at least the founding fathers and some of these people, even like Comte and Saint Simon, had some concept of virtue that they're holding on to.
Right.
It's sort of kind of like rights. They're like, it went from natural rights to legal rights to human right to it just keeps being stripped down more and more. So it's like, well, now we don't even have a concept of rights.
Well, and that brings
for
us to
example,
the topic of Trump, right? So this whole conviction then is really just about a power dynamic and this lip service of virtue, and they're getting rid of this somebody who's going to undermine democracy. It goes back to your point that this is really about semantics and power plays, and that really is what social justice and a lot of contemporary quote unquote virtue, social virtue is just submitting to that power structure and then leveraging that power over people who don't conform.
I mean, this stuff literally doesn't exist. I got a tag. I don't know. The lady that used to have the number that I had before I moved up here must have been named Amber. But I talked about this in the morning stream. Listen to this. Hi, Amber. It's Montana securing reproductive rights.
Oh my!
We're fighting to protect reproductive rights in Montana, but we have only 3 weeks to get on the ballot. So if you don't know, in Montana Constitution, abortion was a constitutional protection only in virtue of Roe v. Wade. And once that was overturned, now it's all opened, right? And so we're hoping, it'll be voted out the way Idaho and some of these other states have, because there's nothing legally to protect them. So what you have is the social justice warriors. What do? They're trying to get enough signatures to put it on the ballot that it could be a constitutional amendment. Now, this is just crazy. I think at state level, a constitutional amendment should be just as hard as a federal constitutional amendment. I just vote on it and just switch this stuff and add this stuff in. Anyways, I just had to, you'll get a joke out of this. I had to write back and said, there's no such thing as reproductive rights. The word you're looking for is murder. Take your Malthusian death cult and leave Montana. You're not wanted here.
Did they respond? Did they respond to you?
Yeah, it's hilarious. They said, thank you for your time. Which gave me a great idea. It was like, wow, I'm going to start using this psyop on my haters and criticize them. Thank you so much. We value your feedback and criticisms.
Yeah. But it
goes
goes
to put you on hold for 5 minutes. We transfer you to the complaint department.
But you made a great point that I wanted to connect, because you brought up rights and this power dynamic. And when it comes to like reproductive rights, so it's like this idea that the government can issue certain rights from its centralized power, and their centralized fiat power, and virtue is really about duty. And so the duty of a mother is to uphold and protect the life of her child.
Yes.
But by redefining it semantically through the language of rights, post-Enlightenment rights, and the government can then change what rights, what type of rights, what kind of rights, it destabilizes the collective sense of duty we have as a culture and people. And where
that you and I have talked about this too, that the kind of postmodern semantics, we call them sorcery words, is that there's no cognitive meaning, because they're not intended to convey information. They're purposely vague. You make it up. And why? Because they're slogans and jargons, just like a cult would use, right? They use these to maintain control and power over the one, or cast a spell over, and people fall for it. Now, all you have to do to see past the con and that this is actually wizardry and sorcery is ask any of these people with these boards out here trying to get people signed up about using reproductive rights. Or there was another sign that I saw that I forget, something similar. Ask them what a right is and where it comes from. They'll have no idea. It's like the student protesters, right? Ask them what they're protesting. I don't know.
Yeah, Gaza. Yeah, there were so many videos going around where people were asking them, and they had no. And that's where that's another interesting thing that even relates with Trump. I mean, we see Israel has a hegemony over U.S. politicians, but as Orthodox Christians, obviously our sympathies are going to be with the Palestinian people. But the way that they galvanized all these political protests on universities delegitimized the support for Palestine as,
I mean, how upsetting that your enemy, the worst types of people, are taking your side. And really, this is kind of like a psyop, like you said, Patrick, in itself, where, like you saw this in the Soviet times, where you can, you construct the controlled opposition, right? And you make them look like idiots to delegitimize the, because that's the way I feel. I'm like, don't lump me in with those people, right?
Right.
But at the same time, my allegiance is with Palestinian Christians. They're my
They're
brothers.
my brother.
Like, yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's very frustrating to see. I've been very frustrated at that because I'm like, you don't want to be a Zionist, but you don't want to be with the woke, pink, purple-haired, Transformers.
Yeah.
Even the Palestinians wouldn't want them to support them.
Yeah, the Palestinians are like,
please don't.
Yeah,
Habibi, please don't.
It definitely reminds me of like accelerationism almost. Like it's almost purposely like this is made to be as silly as possible to make everything just look dumb and I guess meaningless. So like basically get people to just not even care one way or another because both sides look silly.
Right. Let me catch up on, we just have a couple super chats that came in, and then I got another question for you guys, whether or not you actually think we're going to have an election in 2024. I'm curious what Father Deacon's thoughts are. We got an echo from somebody. Yeah, I think it was Nadeem. The Trump Schwab throws in $5, says, I will not go to prison and you will be happy. Well, thank you so much, Trump Schwab. I appreciate that. And over on the Dono chat, RIP said, God bless DPH. Great stream topic. Thank you for the panel. And Anonymous said, thanks too much. I didn't want to overstep / go commercial myself, but if it's okay for you to mention my co-translation of international Castro Chavism, it'd be more than I could appreciate. Well, there you go. Shout out to Andrew. And there's your mention. Thank you for the support, Andrew. And Blue Skittle throws in $5. No comment. Thank you very much, Blue Skittle. And it looks like Frankie D just threw one in. He says for $10, those people are so arrogant too. You ask, well, what is a right and where does it come from? And they give you this attitude and mock you because they can't explain it. They just repeat some phrase. Yeah, very true. So curious, Father Deacon and the general panel, do you guys think that we're even going to have an election? Or I mean, what are your general sentiments? Are they going to let Trump be president? Is there going to be, mass chaos, civil war, World War III? What is your general inclination? I mean, obviously it's all speculative. Nobody knows. We're not fortune tellers or prophets, but what's your hunch?
Well, I guess it depends on how much, what do they call that?
Thank you, Logan.
That Trump's leading in the polls if he's beyond a margin of cheating, as they call it, right? Which is what Trump was kind of running on, that, look, we just have to win so big that you couldn't even cheat. Expect them to, if we get closer to that, then I think that, again, things that I worry about is a false flag. We can't have elections. I mean, because think about what happened in January 6th. They were having hearings to hear the cases about election fraud. And then what happens? You have the MAGA people break into the Capitol, and then the investigations just stop. Like, what are the two?
Right.
You got a tidy little incident to just
Oh yeah,
sweep it all
we
under the
don't
rug.
do investigations anymore, right? I could see them maybe doing something like that. Obviously, as you'd mentioned too, that Trump's own son has thought about an assassination. But it'll all depend on how much he's leading and if he's above that margin of what they call the margin of cheating, I think. Right. Can you think of maybe a third possibility?
Ron?
Well, the three possibilities I laid out that I believe, because I'm very skeptical of the integrity of
World War III. That's a good one.
Yeah.
So we can't have elections because we're all going to die.
They just go ahead and lie on another faulty rigged election, even though maybe it's even more obvious and more out in the open, but they're going to have the political power and the military power. What are you going to do about it? And if you do respond, that just plays into their hand in regards to domestic conflict, domestic terrorism. We need to issue the National Guards and the military to go after these people, or they assassinate him, or they let him be president. I mean, those four options seem like the only possibilities at this point. And anybody in the United States, I know Ivan and Nadim aren't, but if you're in this country, there's no doubt that the support for Trump is vastly superior than anything coming out of the Democratic Party. But we all know that they control the institutions. So what are you going to do about it?
I think like there's gonna be like a lot of mail-in ballots that are gonna make the election just another rigged election. So I don't think Trump's gonna win, but not because he couldn't get the votes, just simply because it's never been easier for the Democrats to like do mass fraud.
Yeah.
So I think actually I think it's the other way around. I think a lot of Democrat states, I know certainly here in California, this.
God bless you, John.
Well, St. John, I have to stay here because St. John, San Francisco. But they're probably worried about Republicans doing the same thing, because a lot of people, they rigged the election in '60, and I forget which, but there was another election where the Republicans, back then did the same thing. So I think the mail-in voter thing is not going to be an issue this time. I think a lot of people are going to go out and vote in person. But honestly, I think the soft landing is Ron DeSanctimonious. I think they let the Republicans win, because the Democrats know the Republicans suck at winning. I mean, after 40, 50 years of this, they'll just let the Republicans win and put Ron DeSanctimonious in because Trump's in prison. I think that's the softest landing. I don't think we need World War III or riots or something like this. It's just Ron DeSanctimonious and not William F. Buckley, the Trotskyite neocons just continue, having power. Because look at Patrick, did you talk about the border thing?
Yeah.
In Texas, like, look what Greg Abbott did. It's clear even in places where they're literally have, conservative values, that those people still will, continue their agenda. So I don't know. I think it's DeSanctimonious. I think Trump's in prison. DeSanctimonious gets in.
I think we can bring it back to virtue. I think the American people will do, in their point of view, the most virtuous thing, and they'll go get their "I voted" pen. So
right.
John,
go ahead.
If I may,
go ahead.
I think that situation is kind of like the worst of both worlds, in the sense that who would have to decide that Trump does not run? It would have to be the Republican Party, and the people will not like the party making that decision for them. So if you look at the numbers, Trump was way higher than DeSantis. Even though, like, me personally, if I was in the US, I would prefer DeSantis, not because for me, DeSantis is a cuck, definitely a cuck, but like, I would prefer him because he seems more presidential. The fact that you already know that Trump has that much support means that the Republican Party cannot leave Trump out of it without a huge blowback. And if it does that, I think a lot of the hardcore Trump voters will feel so dejected that they will simply not vote. They will not turn out to vote.
Yeah, I think with the way the RNC's been going, unless something happens where it's basically impossible for Trump to run even off the Republican ticket, it'll basically just lose all votes.
Yeah, well, and to John's point, you know, if they were to try to, because like as we mentioned earlier with the video with MTG, that the Mike Johnson, the House leader, he is not pulling back the Smith investigation, which the Congress could totally just say, no, we're not going to allow that to go forth. He's allowing that potential case to go forth. And it makes sense in regards to what John would say, is that even the Trotskyite neocon conservatives would potentially want Trump to somehow be taken off the ballot, and then they could just go ahead and place somebody in place and try to hope that that Trump fervor would just then back the person that they've already chosen. That makes sense to me. Storm the Cat threw in $10. Shout out to Storm the Cat. Thank you so much, brother. He says, I was listening to Jay Dyer's talk on the Hat Man, and I noticed that the silhouette of the Hat Man with the wide brim looks kind of like Saturn. I wonder if there's a connection between the Hat Man and Saturn/Moloch. Father Deacon, do you know what the Hat Man is? I'm not sure what Storm the Cat's referring to.
I don't know who asked that. I think they asked it in my chat today too, and I was
Storm the Cat.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what the Hat Man is.
Was it a movie analysis? You can't trust anything Jay says. That guy, he's deep state, KGB.
Well, and we had
doing
one
sorcery on you every time you watch his videos.
That's true.
True. Yeah, I thought he was a KGB agent.
Yeah, he is. I mean, he has a direct connection back to Putin. Somebody in the chat, let me know what the Hat Man is. I have no idea what I'm sorry, Storm the Cat. I'm not sure who the Hat Man is. And hitting that all day throws in $20. Thank you so much. They say, I hope to make it to Montanica this year. If not, thank you for your morning prayers, Father Deacon. God bless. And Father Deacon, regarding Montanica,
yeah, it's sad if this was the end of the world and last Montanica.
Yeah, it might be the last Montanica. So get your tickets at Patristic Faith.
Yeah, thanks. And we could actually, if we do make it to next year, God willing, we should take a tour of the nukes facility, Hallstrom's Air Force Base. With that,
yeah. But Father Deacon, this is a total side note. Shout out to our brother Christopher Zambersky. I know I believe you know who that is. He showed me his icon stand that he just made that he's bringing to Montanica. Absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, we're going to set him up is kind of like a vendor. And then also what's really cool, I've got a friend that I met up in Kalispell. They just moved from California, from Carlsbad, and they're at St. Herman's Parish, and he's made his own company, St. Herman's Studios, and he's producing these engravings. It's kind of hard to see. And we're going to set him up. So that's going to work really well with Christopher's. We can even maybe set some of these up and just, you know how we like to do things. We like to reinvest in our Orthodox community and support our brothers and sisters. So we're really happy to have both Christopher and Tanner is vendors that we can kind of help promote their businesses. And so thank you guys.
Yeah. Austin Purcell's got a question for the panel. Says, what do you guys think about voting itself? Should we go out and vote?
I kind of see it as a Pascal's wager. It's like if you do it, it's nothing's gonna change, or if you don't, then nothing's gonna change. So you can do it if you want, but in the national standpoint, I don't see any point in doing it. If it's more like local, probably like a state thing or a district thing, I think your vote matters more. But in a national standpoint, especially in the US, It's obviously useless, but if you want to do it, do it. You won't lose anything.
Yeah, I have some thoughts about this because, and then I'm gonna have to go. I need to
Sure.
go play some bluegrass tonight.
Ooh, where at the parish? Are you going to? Where are you going to?
Hey, don't worry about it. Anyway, no, it's just a local. It's a cool name of the band. It's called String Being, Being. Isn't that cool?
Oh, that is cool.
I was like, are you guys a bunch of secret Heideggerians or something? Like,
did that go over their head or did they get it?
Yeah. Well, actually, we have another philosophy theology professor that I work with, plays Mando with me too, so it wouldn't go over his head. But, anyways, Heidegger meets bluegrass, whatever. So
that's a world turned upside down. Guys, smash that like for everybody who's still here. Really appreciate you guys. Okay,
so I'll leave with this last point. Yeah. So, do you remember when Kant? I believe it was Kant, to act as if God exists or something like that.
Right.
I think there's something to be said about like voting. That first of all, we're on here speculating, right? Like how controlled is it? How much? None of us really know 100%. Does it actually make a difference? Like nobody knows that. So in one sense, act as if it does. We don't know if Trump is part of the technocracy. We don't know that. We might have some evidence and guesses of that, but act as if it's not, unless you have that kind of high bar. And I certainly think when Deem said that at the local level, I think it actually is important to vote. I don't want to get the kind of, as a libertarian, I was just like, I don't vote. I've exited the system, and it doesn't matter. We don't want to be black-pilled, right? And so there's a kind of combination between kind of a Machiavellian pragmatism and principles as too. So I know nationally, voting for, if somebody were to vote for Trump in Montana, it doesn't matter because Trump's going to win. I'm kind of more concerned at the local levels, right? As far as judges, superintendents, things like this. And it's hard for me, unless you're a monk that really has exited society, it is hard for me to see how there's not some duty to, unless 100%, what none of us does, to act as if it does, to still participate. Otherwise, I don't know how can you really complain about your city and your superintendent or mayor or something like that if you're like, well, I didn't participate in that in any way? That's kind of what I've been wrestling. I don't have a kind of completely thought out answer. We certainly don't want the kind of evangelicalism, as Nadim had put, that they're giving like they're supporting like candidates. I remember in evangelical churches, they'll tell you exactly who to vote for and what to vote for. We can't be like that where we put politics above our faith. It should be that our faith, but we don't exit politics too. This is kind of my thought. And unless we're monastic, we let our faith inform how we understand policies and vote and things like this. And it seems clear that there's certain stuff that like no Orthodox Christian could ever be a part of or vote for.
Well, you make a great point, and that was going to be my response regarding thinking locally. Like I live in a county south of Indianapolis here in Indiana. Indiana's going to go for Trump massively. It's a very, very red state outside of like two major cities. And our sheriff, who you vote for, did not uphold any of the COVID stuff. So our county, while Indianapolis, Marion County was in lockdown, Johnson County, our sheriff said, "Oh, you don't want to wear a mask when you go in? Fine. The sheriff's department will not enforce any violations of any, quote unquote, medical requirements for during the pandemic." So, like you said, I think that you made a really good point that I didn't think about is it thinking as if it, act as if God is real and we don't know the extent to which it's corrupted. But I know when I probably will vote, and I'm with everybody in the chat who's saying it doesn't matter in regards to national elections and all this different stuff. But for the local elections in the local county, I have to be pretty thankful that my county is very conservative.
And even at the federal, the national level, we don't know that 100%.
Right.
We don't know, like you said, how it's going to play out, how influence is, whether it's all controlled and manipulated. So,
see, my fellow Johnson Countyan, Slow Boy Whiteboard says, "Let's go Johnson County." I never had to wear a mask once. Same. And
yeah, we have a governor that overturned that stuff too throughout the mandates. So that certainly does matter. And then I told you about the other philosophy professor. He had a debate. We have a tap house, where it was owned by the former governor, who was a Democrat, Bullock. But as bad as he was, at least he has kind of a cool idea that every Monday night there's debates. There's public debates on religion. Cool. And this Monday night, my colleague invited me, and the theme was, can a Christian ever vote for Trump? And you got a never Trumper who was conservative, but a never Trumper. And then, and I'll explain to you, it's a really interesting story. And then my friend and colleague who is arguing yes, even though he was like, he's not my ideal candidate. So anyways, here's how it went. The guy on the other side was a conservative, was part of the Democratic Party. He was a lawyer and political science guy. And so he got kicked out of the Democratic Party because he was a pro-lifer. And basically, the Democratic Party says they ousted all the pro-lifers. So you can't even be pro-life and be part of any active part of the Democratic Party. And then Biden doubles down and says, we're going to be the most pro-abortion party ever. He switched over to reluctantly over to the Republican Party, but didn't like Trump. And of course, it was the same criticisms. Well, he's not a man of virtue. Like, look, blah, blah, blah. No Christian should vote for a man like this. And then my friend and colleague took kind of the more Machiavellian, pragmatic approach that, first of all, and we were going through, was kind of coaching through the debate. Nobody votes for politicians because they're virtuous. None of them are. Right. This is a pragmatic game in terms of you're going to have to analyze this. Again, even if it's rigged or anything like that, if on principle, who would be the best for our people, the Christians? That's the way you got to think about it, right? Get the whole idea, because Machiavelli was correct on that. But don't be so principled that you don't get anything done, right? There's a pragmatics of politics. Well, I could never vote for. Okay, wait a minute. We got a plumber. We got two plumbers supposed in this town. One's just awful, but he's a wonderful, virtuous Christian. But he's actually gonna mess up your plumbing. The other one, he's out at the strip clubs and he's partying all the time. He's not a good guy, but gosh dang it, I'll just tap into my Norm Macdonald. Yeah, this guy over here, he's a great plumber. I know he's down at the strip club and not a good guy, but he'll get the job done. And well, gosh dang it, that's the guy you got to go for when you get your plumbing down. And you got to kind of have some of that in your kind of notion of politics. And now again, but principle does matter. So there's this kind of balance, right?
Right.
Between the two. So if anybody were to, I'm not going to tell you as Orthodox, we don't tell you who to vote for. However, I think in principle, we can kind of lay out an informed conscience. You vote for the person that not necessarily even represents the Christian values, but would be the best for Christians at the particular time. Now, in the end, are they all working for the Illuminati and the Technocracy? Maybe, but act as if they're not, right? Because maybe there's a slight chance. That's kind of my take on all that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good take, and it gives at least some type of positive perspective on the voting and the electoral system in the United States that shows that there is some agency for Christians, and we shouldn't just totally check out like some people suggest. So, anyways, Father Deacon, I'll let you go. Anything you want to promote or shout out before you leave?
I've started some new courses, some open enrollment right now. If you check out Patristic Faith, my Shopify, patristicfaith.my, I'll just put it in the chat. I do these university these 16-week courses. You can also you don't have to do the 16-week. You can take it as slow as you want. But I use the educational software. I've created 2 new courses in ethics and an intro to philosophy, and then a brand new logic. And you get an hour to 2 hours, usually 2 hours, 16 weeks of tutoring and Q&A and stuff like that. So it's really, that's the only thing I kind of want to promote.
All right. Well, everybody go over to Patristic Faith. Make sure you subscribe. I'm sure most of the people here already do.
We're opening enrollment for the next 2 weeks, and I'm going to kick that off right there. So I think that's about it. I'm hoping you can join us next year. And for all those that will be here, if this isn't the last year, the end of the age,
Jesus is at the door. He's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
Tell your wife
for having me on.
Tell your wife
and,
I said hi.
Thank you. And we got to do some philosophy streams. This is great.
Yeah.
Praying for you. And really excited about hearing the kind of the research that you're getting into in your PhD. That's fantastic. Really, really interesting, actually.
Well, when I get chapter 1 done, I'll send it over to you for any critical assessment and advice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
God bless. Christ is risen, and the pagans are
truly. Ethos Christi.
Later, Father Deacon.
Thank you, Father Deacon.
All right, gentlemen. Well, anything everybody else wants to say before we kind of wrap things up in regards to Trump and the topic at hand today? Feel free if anybody wants to add something or feels like we missed something, or if anybody wants to say something else about voting. Logan, you didn't say anything about voting. And you being a military guy, the commander in chief, I mean, what are your thoughts about voting? Are you going to vote?
I mean, yeah, I'll vote because there's a variety of reasons to it. Again, I'm not sure how much good it'll actually do, but
right.
Want to at least vote towards what would be better for us rather than abandoning it up to the whims of people that don't care for us.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes sense. That's, it's so easy to be black-pilled right now, and it's so easy to sort of check out of everything, and that's where it's like I struggle, because I feel the same way, but I don't want to actually be somebody so disenchanted with everything that I don't do little things that I could to make my little area that I live better. And that's where I think focusing on local politics and, cast your national vote, but who knows, the thing may be totally rigged. It may not be. And it's certainly not that, we're voting for Trump because he's the Messiah, as some of the Protestants got into during the first election. But, we're in a difficult spot as a country right now. And there isn't, as Frankie D was saying earlier, there isn't much worldly upside. But if we can at least have strong local communities when everything does collapse, we'll be in a better place.
I mean, there is also no downside in just casting a vote, unless you're forced to be jabbed or something to go there.
I mean, they might put me on the list, but
yeah,
I think everybody here is already on something.
I was gonna say if I'm not already on it,
I'm on this call. I mean,
I'll leave you guys with one funny thing. So, my brother-in-law, very funny guy. and he has some family members that are very liberal, and my family and then half of his family, we're all very conservative people. And so we get together and we always have a good time, but the liberal members of his family, you know, have a very different worldview than we do. And he told me that, you know, he donated to the Trump campaign in like 2020 or something. And he was talking about how nonstop he's always getting emails and texts and phone calls, and he tries to block them and they're still contacting him. So what he's doing is donating to Trump's reelection campaign in the name and emails of 3 of his different family members who are liberals, so that for as long as they have those emails and phone numbers, they will be getting first a message thanking them from Donald Trump for their contributions, and they'll be asked for donations for as long as they have that contact information.
Oh my gosh. No, he ain't joking either. Like, I'm not gonna lie. During the 2020 election, I donated a little bit, and like it's nonstop.
That's what he was saying. And so his family, his sister's going to be so mad when the only time we all get together is Thanksgiving every year. And so that's going to be after the election. And whether he wins or not, they're going to be so mad because they're going to be getting contacted forever asking for donations to the Republican Party, and they are never Trumpers. They are the MSNBC type people. So I'll just leave everybody with that. I thought that was hilarious, and I'm looking forward to Thanksgiving this year.
It's funny.
But anyways, we had one more super chat that came in. Shout out to Storm the Cat, throws in $5. Says, I disagree with Trump on some things, especially the jabs. Yeah, especially that. However, people who say that Trump is so immoral are phonies. They vote for people who literally worship Moloch, and they want to preach about morality. Or, as we know with Biden and the diary of his daughter, literal incestual pedophiles. Allegedly. We're on YouTube.
Allegedly.
They vote for dementia patients. That's like the most obvious thing. Like,
right.
If anyone in the U.S. thinks Joe Biden is a functioning adult, he has no brain cells left. If you think that Joe Biden can conduct a complete phrase without every minute instructions, you know.
Agreed. I totally agree. Well, Logan, I want to thank you personally for gifting 5 COTEL Crew memberships, brother. Thank you very much, man. And thank you for all your support. I really do appreciate that.
Oh, of course. I'm happy to support.
Well, I just want to thank you, and I want to thank everybody. So shout out to Blue Skittle, shout out to Andrew and RIP, shout out to Storm the Cat. Major thank you to Frankie D, hitting that all day, and Austin Purcell. So thank you guys very much for your support today. Really appreciate it. And gentlemen, is there anything you guys want to say before we hop off here?
Do what's when voting. Remember, everything is lawful, but not everything is beneficial. So I think that's a good final do you want to the whole stream.
Right. Hey, and John, you stay safe, man. You're in California.
Right on the border of Placer County. I could flee to the mountains. Thank God.
I feel yeah. I'm stuck in the People's Republic of Greater Shirakistan over here, so.
Yeah, that's I tell you what, as somebody from Indiana, I hate going to Chicago. That is always a nightmare. I got caught going to the airport right during rush hour. Good Lord, that is a nightmare to get through Chicago. But I'll also keep you in my prayers, Logan, you and John. Stay safe, guys, in your blue dystopias. Nadeem, thanks for hopping on, brother. Always appreciate.
No worries.
And Ivan, it wouldn't be an open panel without you, my man. So really appreciate you hopping on. God bless you. You still in Spain?
Yeah.
Great. All right, guys. Christ is risen. I will see you all next time. The next stream will be a sponsored stream. We'll be talking about Alfred the Great, his life, legacy, and some of the Orthodox history in England. So I will see you all then. As always, until next time, God bless.
Thanks, Patrick.